Hi, everyone, and welcome to Todd Talks. I've had a ton of coffee and Red Bull, so get ready for that. I am joined by Jim Davis of WebDM, and we're talking about Conjuring today in Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yes.
Some people said we couldn't do an entire show about Conjuring. I tell you, you're wrong, because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with Conjuring? I am flirting with the idea. And what's funny is you and I were talking about this, off camera and via Twitter, about how we handle Conjuring. It's what I kind of fell in love with. I recently summoned the Greater Demon, but I called them by name like they were a work, a friend from work.
Yeah.
That role playing was delightful. I called him Thurzadan, and we talked about what we had done on Tuesday. And there was like this whole role play element to, instead of just conjuring a giant demon, it was like, this is the demon I conjure. And you like, and without me telling you, that's exactly what
that's
you
exactly
do.
how I do it. Yeah, exactly. It's the same one every time.
So tell me a little bit how you handle conjuring as a DM.
So I kind of take the old school approach, like not old school, like third edition approach, where there's two types of conjuring. You can just summon a thing and it'll come and fight for you. And it might not even be an actual thing. It might be more like a construct or something. Now I moved away from that one to you got to like find something. You've got to make some kind of a pre-summoning arrangement or something as part of the summoning that establishes a relationship between the caster and the summoned creature. And it's like every time you cast that spell, it brings this specific creature to you. And so it remembers you. It remembers what you did to it, what you asked of it. It establishes this relationship. And then it also allowed me to like have players meet creatures and the like, particularly like fiends or celestials or fae or something, outside of the summoning context, and establish a relationship with each other. And then that creature goes, you know what, when you need me, here's my number. And then the spell becomes the way to call them to you. I found it just like really enhanced a lot of things and made those summoning players like really get invested in their creatures that they summon. And it's been nothing but blue sky since then.
I've always enjoyed the concept of summoning. I enjoyed it in previous editions of the game a great deal. I even like the idea. I mean, I would be totally down, even if it was almost treated in a way like polymorph, but like even if the caster could take no actions other than concentrate to control this creature, I'd be okay with that, because I'm just playing a demon. I'm just playing, this undead thrall. So I've always liked it, but I feel like 5th edition got very penalty focused on conjuring with the concentration. I understand you want to concentrate and control a demon, but also if you lose concentration, this comes down to like animate dead. Like you have to like maintain that spell, otherwise skeletons become super not fun anymore. Because I love the idea of summoning skeletons, but if I screw up and they murder a village, that takes the kind of the shine off animate dead.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel like the philosophy of it has changed, though. Do you feel like it has changed? Like in midstream for 5th edition, we've seen some spells that have very much gone in another direction, both in wording and also the ultimate effect.
Yeah. It does seem like that the way 5th edition handles summoning creatures, whether it's through conjuration, necromancy, whatever, really, is like a reaction to prior editions where you have, all right, we got to break out the monster manual. All right, what are the stats? Okay, I need to look at this and see how many hit dice of creatures I can summon or whatever. And then there's the added, it takes up an extra turn in combat. And, if you use planar binding, then you just start walking around with your menagerie of creatures.
Right.
And so like you can still do that in 5th edition. It's not out of the realm of possibility to have that kind of like summoned menagerie, but it takes more, it's higher level when you can do it. And ultimately though, even though there's restrictions on summoning in 5th edition, it still adheres to that prior sort of model of looking through the monster manual for something that the player can access. And it's in that sense, like these monsters aren't necessarily made for players; they're made for dungeon masters. And so I think like fifth edition kind of straddles a line between trying to find a way to make it work, but not be a huge hassle, but still kind of requires you to a player to flip through the monster manual, or a DM to go like, geez, all right, how many CR 1/8 beasts are there, or how many CR1 Fae or whatever,
Because some of that is, I mean, in the writing of like Conjure Demons is like, okay, well, the DM has to find, and then that's putting stuff on the DM.
Yeah.
Gotta tell you, DM's already doing a lot. Scaling mirror image is a fun spell, but you quickly learn the player really needs to take care of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or the DM, because it's just too much micromanaging.
Mm-hmm.
To your point of like, and this is why I like the new Unearthed Arcana variant spells.
Very much. Yeah.
I think they're perfect. This scale. Well, we will see if they are perfect. I love the options, in particularly with the undead. What's very unusual, and this started with Shadow of, but this started with Dance Macabre. So you have a whole bunch of dead bodies around you, and about 5 of them jump up, I believe. They fall back down when you're done. They are no longer a threat, and especially with parties, they need to deal with not even just alignment, just perspective differences. Like, I play very evil. I do terrible things as a player for the greater good. Particularly, we're talking about Averin, and I'm talking about my good friend Lauren Urban, who plays Orkira, who has a problem with undead. Averin's been undead lots of times, so he has a different perspective on good and evil and on death. But those spells, these new spells, also are very similar in the fact, or took a step further. Those spells in Unearthed Arcana say they are friendly to you.
Yeah.
And they go away once the spell is done. That's it.
Yeah.
No threat. I guess so. You like the idea of, like, say, if you were to summon one of these undead spirits, one of these fae, this is the same person every time.
Every time. Yeah. Every time. And
do you come with that character, or do they, the player?
Usually it's a mutual thing. I'll suggest, like, I'll suggest something, but the parties that I've used this for, we've been playing together for years. We're very, in tune with each other's kind of D&D sensibilities, and so I generally trust that the player will come up with something. Usually I'll come up with a name, and then they run away with the rest. So some of the most memorable ones that I can think of, in Out of the Abyss, I had one of the players playing a necromancer. And she met a quasit at some point in the adventure, just met one somewhere, and befriended it, and mostly by like encouraging it to do evil and be wicked and cause mayhem, and then was like, if you pal around with me, you get to do so much more mayhem. Like, it's going to be insane, the kind of things you'll get up to. And so through this like relationship building and just role play, really, I was like, yeah, you know what, just cast a Find Familiar at like 3rd level, and you'll get I forget what it's, Billiam or something weird like that name. And then she would just like let it roam free, just like, come back in a week and let's check in. And so here's a quasit running around, just doing what a quasit does, and then would check in. So for her, it was more of it was as much like a mechanical thing, like she wanted a souped up familiar from like a bat she'd had earlier, as well as it opens up this entire possibility of role play and interaction. And we eventually decided that at some point when it went back to the Abyss, that it became a greater version. Like, it wasn't going to come back as a quasit, it was going to come back as like a babu, or the one that has like the reverse horn out of it. So, so it's just a lot of fun.
Are there problems with, like, how big was that party?
There were four in the party. We were playing an explicitly evil game. Everybody had agreed to. There was an Oathbreaker paladin, a Death Domain cleric in the party, and so it didn't bog things down. The dynamic, didn't change or anything. But we actually got to use those spells that are like, I guess the playtest versions of like Summon Lesser Demon, Summon Greater Demon. And it was fun to sort of like watch the necromancer player just all right, I'm going to stand in my little circle of blood. I've animated a bunch of skeletons and zombies. I'm going to summon forth a bunch of demons. You guys might want to leave here and let me handle this one. And players are perfectly fine going like, yeah, we'll sit this one out or go do something else while this combat takes place. And then I just abstract. We're not going to do round by round here.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like that. Whereas I am deeply, I used to love the monster summoning spells 1 through 5.
Yeah.
I thought they were hilarious. One of my favorite tropes in as a dungeon master has been to summon players with monster summoning, which I always find hilarious. I have a particular wizard that constantly casts it, and like they people just show up.
Right,
it's kind of the worst. But does it slow the game down? Because like in a party say of 6 and you have one of the players conjuring creatures, are we now bogging down combat? Is it now a problem of like, okay, we really need to talk about this? Are we really going to use familiars a bunch? Are we going to use conjuration of creatures a bunch? Because even familiars can slow it down. Are any of these things problematic? Like familiars being sent forward every time? Because why wouldn't you? Because of course you would play it that way.
Yeah. They can be, certainly. And I think this is one of those things that a DM and a player needs to like negotiate with themselves. Like when I play, say, a druid, which to me in 5th edition are like the premier conjurers, I will usually give the DM a heads up. Hey, I've prepped conjure animals. I've got conjure minor fae or whatever. Here's what I'm thinking. Or even though the DM's going to pick and be like, I know I don't want these options. Like you don't have to worry about me wanting, say, pixies and the shenanigans that come with that. So I usually give the DM tell them where I'm coming from, so that they know whenever I cast this spell that they're not going to be in for, combat slowing to a crawl or like trying to get away with something that they're going to make a headache for them. I also do things like ask if I can pre-roll their attacks. And just, in between my turns, I'm just rolling, marking down what I got, what the damage might be. And then when it's my turn, I can say, all right, well, my whatever's, this is what I got to hit. This is what their damage would be. And then the dungeon master can say, oh, yeah, every one of them, but that one hits, etc.
It is an opportunity for a dungeon master to take it as abstraction, like you just said. Like, your demon just starts murdering like a bunch of the soldiers like that. Like I'm not necessarily in it for the roles, as a player. I'm in it for the flavor. I'm far more interested in the role-playing aspect of it. I mean, certainly it can go either way, especially if you got a bunch of minis and you just want to play with Warhammer.
If you're down for like, okay, we're doing a war game today, that's just what we're doing. Big combat, lots of minis. That's one thing. But if it's like an unexpected fight or something that's like, say, you have to be done with your session within an hour, that's easily where I'll ask the player, like, what do you want them to do? What do you want to accomplish with this spell? And as much as possible, we'll abstract it or have it grant advantage or be like, all right, they're going to tie up these enemies. You don't know what's going on. You're dealing with your enemies. When it's over, we'll figure out what happened. That's usually how I will present it.
I've become obsessed with this enough that I obviously we have the conjuration wizard. It takes for like what I would like as a conjuration wizard, it takes me till 14th level for that to come online. Where my summons are tougher, because they're dealing with all manner of conjuring, not just summoning monsters. I am right now working on a subclass of a warlock that just that's their focus, is the summoning. I feel like the warlock should be the premier summoner. They're the one who makes the deals. They're the one who maybe are summoned. Right? Like, so it's of all of the classes, the warlock is the most transitive.
Certainly
built in. So
there's also some difficulties being a summoner though, because their spell slots cap out at 5, right? And so there's a hard limit on what you're going to get out of those. I mean,
maybe you should. And also that was not I would say that would never be a functional use of your spell slots as a warlock until this Unearthed Arcana, where we do have these now summoned creatures you get to choose. if you're looking at summoning undead, it can be like a banshee, like wraith, ghost creature. You can make a skeleton. You can make something putrid, and they all have different abilities. The same goes for, I believe, the fae. Same goes for the demon. Same goes for because there is now a new demon variant as well, a UA that scales, which is lovely. And then we've got the Shadowfell, which are the saddest ones. They're just very sad people, or very angry people, or lots of things. But you get 3 options pretty much with all of them.
Yeah.
Or flavor, but they scale, and that works so well with the warlock. Now, I think that kind of overcomes that particular hurdle.
Yeah.
Whereas you had like more an issue with like summon demons. You're like, I don't necessarily want to do this at top level.
Yeah, and especially the way that the conjure spells work versus the summon ones. Like the conjure ones, because they're based on CR.
Yeah,
like you can sometimes get some real duds, or if you don't have a DM who's like in tune with what you'd like, and they pick something that is not appropriate, or just that neither one of you have really looked at before. That's another thing, is like getting access to a monster and you look at the stat block and you're like, what is this? Like there's all these abilities, traits. How do I use this creature? Whereas the summon versions, number one, the stats are in the spell book. That's already, they are head and shoulders above the conjure spells for me, because that doesn't require the player to have access to a whole other book.
Yeah.
And because it's clear what their function is, right? Like they don't have a ton of stuff going on, and maybe that's a mark against them. I don't think so, but it's clear what they do.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is range support. This is a melee buddy, that kind of thing,
Yep. Reminds me kind of like summoning in, say, something like Elder Scrolls Online or an MMO. Like this is the undead that can do ranged. This is the undead that runs up and explodes. That kind of mentality, I think, takes a lot of complications out of things very quickly.
And given the casting times, given how long they last, these are clearly like short-term combat type spells. Like there's a case to be made for, I'm going to learn this thing's true name. I got my silver circle inlaid in the floor. We're going to spend a whole day summoning this guy. He's going to stick around for a year and a day. That's one thing. But I don't know how many people are playing that kind of D&D. Whereas I feel like these are more useful for a broader range of D&D games, the summon spells.
Where have you had like moments where things just got too bogged down with summoning, with conjuration?
Yes, it was me. It was my fault. I was the player. Yep.
How did you make it difficult, and was there ever a resolution to this issue?
Well, I voluntarily scaled back. So I was playing a druid in 3.5, as you do, and had some spell or feat or something that let me share my spells with my animal companion, and then I'd summon a bunch of creatures with it. And so it's like, all right, we're both over here polymorphed with all these buffs on us. And it was when I basically handled an entire combat encounter by myself, while the rest of the party just stacked dice, and I was just like, oh, never mind, this is not why we're here. I'll scale back, and just basically told the DM I'm not going to cast those spells anymore. Like that's how we handled that one. But it bogged things down, and it clearly resulted in an unsatisfying session for everybody else. And that to me, that's the big red flag. It's just like when my friends are not in it, when they're not thinking, oh, cool, that's awesome, but they're just like, I guess I'll do this. That's when you're like, all right, I've stepped over a line.
I think they're like, especially like once you get past 4 players, maybe you focus on conjuration like Everett's Black Tentacles, right? You're making AoEs that have a hint of the monster, right?
There's certain spell effects that you can reflavor to be like, I've summoned this thing. And then the spell effect comes out, or like a fireball could easily be, I briefly summon a fire elemental.
Right.
Or something like that,
something explodes. So I think you can still get that flavor without necessarily, because it's all about that attack roll. It's what slows down all D&D combat. I mean, did I get a 20? Did I not? Did I hit the the AC and so forth? And then if you introduce like 5 other monsters all doing the same thing, it suddenly kind of becomes that fun. That's why I would argue for stronger summonings, and you take your character out of combat, which I find interesting. Sure, that's basically what polymorph is, but it's just reflavored.
Yeah, and I think the comparison to polymorph is very appropriate, because there might be some people who go like, what in the world would I do that? Like, why would I ever cast this spell? But it's like, yeah, you might polymorph yourself into a great ape. You're not casting spells then,
Yeah.
and yet you're contributing to combat and everything. Especially for the spells where if control slips, if if the spell just for an instant goes awry, and the creature you summoned is gonna go ape, I think it's appropriate to just be like, yeah, my guy's sitting out, they're behind a corner, and then the creature is just going through, following its commands.
I think right now, if you really want like conjuration without headache, because and we do have a question from chat actually, is there a subclass summoner? There is. They're just not necessarily great at summoning. They're focused a little bit more on the softer side of summoning, not the warlocky, creepy side of summoning. The lurker is actually a really good example of something that is so summon focused. You get you can summon a tentacle. You can summon the maw of your patron, or however you want to think about it. And then you can also summon it to teleport or do damage later on as your capstone. It's summoning. So if you want that summoning warlock, but you don't want to bog down everyone with additional combat that no one cares about, I would highly recommend the Unearthed Arcana Lurker in the Deep. And I am now, just while talking about it, falling more in love with it. I always loved it, but now I love it more because it's an elegant solution to a problem.
It really is. And another way you can, if you're worried about like things bogging down in combat, summon creatures don't have to just attack. They can grant a help action.
Yeah.
I would let them interpose themselves between an attack and another ally. You could just say like they're readying an action to step between, and they'll take the damage. They'll take the hit. Maybe it gets rid of them. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
So like I try to leave myself open as a dungeon master for like creative uses other than we're going to have to deal with 8 more attack rolls on your turn. Now it's easy to just go, okay, they help. That's all they're doing for this combat. Everybody has advantage, and who doesn't love that? Now you're helping your party members. You're not creating a bunch of extra headache, but you're still a summoner. They're still contributing,
We have a question. Is it easier to have a lot of weak summons or a few powerful ones? I tend to go for a few powerful ones because it's way less attack rolls. Unless you're talking about like controlling the battlefield and saying, okay, we've got a lot of enemies over here. I'm just going to send my horde to handle that. And then the DM can just say, I'm just going to make stuff up. Which, by the way, all of D&D is made up.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
There's a framework of rules.
Sure. That's one of those things that there's some, I don't know if they're optional rules or just sort of rules expansions in the DMG that can be useful here, like mob attacks or, how many, when you have a lot of creatures, what can you do to speed things up?
Right.
But I think it's perfectly fine for the dungeon master to just go, all right, is any player involved in this particular part of the combat? No, your characters aren't there. You yourself as a player aren't focused on this. You guys don't even know, like, this is happening so fast, and it's your lives are on the line. It's danger. Like, what are you doing worrying about what's happening way over there when you have an enemy right in front of you? And so I think it's perfectly appropriate to go, you know what? Yeah, you can send them over there. We'll figure out what happens after. We're not going to roll for it. We're going to focus on what's happening right now in front of us.
Right. We got an interesting question. What is the most powerful UA spirit summoning spell? I think they're talking about, and they're asking about, say, the Fey Spirit. I would have to take a very deep dive into all of those. I will say this. There's a couple of weird things. If you're summoning undead, an undead spirit with those particular things, they don't have a CR rating. So your DM is going to have to like kind of think about like, okay, can I even turn this undead when it comes to destroying them? Or, do I go by the letter of the law? They're going to have to apply some kind of CR rating or some kind of addendum to that particular spell.
Certainly.
A lot of spells detect Fey, they detect undead and infernal, and they deal with those 3 things. However, the Shadowfell there is no particular broad type of creature from the Shadowfell.
There's really not.
Therefore, there are no particular spells that identify or attack Shadowfell creatures. So I could argue that they might be the most powerful if you don't want them ever to go away.
Yeah. Because the
They are,
traditional defense against summoned creatures is protection from good and evil, magic
yeah,
circle,
which
things
don't
like
exist
that.
now.
They just don't exist. And
Yeah.
with the removal of like alignment as the qualification for those spells,
Yeah.
There's nothing that protects against monstrosities, which is what shadow spirits are, right?
And we got another, yeah, exactly. I think, and so I would argue that they quite possibly are the most powerful ones. I think the Shadowfell's a bummer. I like the Shadowfell for various reasons in that dark, creepy Ravenloft-like feel, but the Shadowfell spirits that you summon are like just full of anger or full of sadness. That's a lot to deal with.
It really is. It really is. They were called like the Sorrow Sworn, right? And
yes.
I love the Sorrow Sworn. I love the lore behind them. These are the manifest emotions of people who are trapped there.
Yeah.
And we did a whole show on them, right?
Yeah.
That's how much we loved them. At the same time, like it does raise some questions about really your character's going to do that? Like, it's one thing to, I'm going to animate this skeleton, this pile of bones,
right.
and it's going to protect me for a day, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't get loose because it's just one of them.
Yeah.
But like, I'm going to manifest the most harmful, sort of like worst expression of these negative emotions we can, right, to fight someone.
Or like a creature that's so consumed by its own pain.
Yeah.
Like there's a darkness to that.
Very much, yeah.
We have, and also just kind of a bummer to hang out with all the time. There are a handful of conjuration spells out there that create a thing that does damage. Obviously, like we've got Ice Knife, Conjuration Barrage. Would they essentially be blocked from working in areas where creatures can't be conjured? In your opinion? I've seen summoners get miffed when rangers cast Conjure Barrage successfully where the summoning spell failed.
Yeah.
So I would argue, I don't think I'd ever do that. Like if you're a conjurer, I would say those arrows to shot. Like if you're in a cave, they just shot out of the cave walls. That's kind of the point. I don't think you should put a limitation on where you can conjure things. I think it's horrifying. I even think it's hilarious if you conjure like a greater demon inside a small crawl space, because then it's like scraping along. Maybe it actually blocks you from getting any further. I think there's a lot of funny things that can be done with that. So I don't know that I would ever listen. If you're a conjurer, that's what you're doing. If you want to conjure a spell, you want to conjure a spell. I would not limit them. There will be repercussions, just like casting fireball in a very small space.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
I mean, this is one where I would probably change the spell school. Like to me, Conjure Barrage, I'm thinking of like I take this one arrow and make it mini. That sounds like transmutation.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to
mess
around with those.
Yeah.
But I do think like, this is where I would look at the intent of the spell and sort of like the flavor of it. And for effects, I'm trying to remember, like Forbiddance, I think you can't. It's like a 9th, 8th level spell. You may not be able to summon things in it. So it stops it. Mordenkainen's, whatever one of those ones is. Like what's the purpose? If the purpose of the defensive magic is to keep out extraplanar creatures, right, then I'll explain it in that sense. It's not just any conjurations, it's extraplanar creatures. But if I've got if I've had a ranger who's been flavoring their Conjure Barrage as it summons a bunch of Fey spirits that all launch a volley at once, they'll be like, oh, I don't know, that's on you. So in this sense, I look less to the rules as written and more of just like what's the intent of both the action the player wants to take and the defense of that the magic is. My words are all out of order. Whatever defensive magic is around. Yeah.
We've got another question. We kind of answered this. How would you best balance summoning when action economy is already so fragile with a particular group of players? Follow up, how would you handle it in large groups? It would suck to tell a person that couldn't focus on summoning because the group is large. Yeah, of course it sucks. But I think we've given a variety of options. You just kind of agree that this monster will take care of this particular issue. Or the DM just kind of fudges things and does flat damage. I would like to see flat damage maybe included in those summoning spells, actually. I don't know if they are.
it's fairly easy to calculate, but I don't think that they're
it's
listed.
easy to calculate flat damage. I feel like, you know, if you got 6 players, everyone's already fighting for their chance to fight. So that's a larger conversation. I think you do look at just reflavoring spells. I like the idea of like you summon a demon and it vomits up a fireball is kind of funny.
Absolutely.
And entertaining. And that's what people forget is flavoring is you can do anything with flavoring.
I think that reflavoring spells and like learning how to look at what the spell's effect is, like what's it actually doing, and then reverse engineering what else it could look like, because there's all kinds of things fireball could be that represent like summoned creatures or lightning bolt or anything like that, you know.
My wife Megan Kenreck plays Sophia's on Silver and Steel later today. She's obsessed with the actual spell components and utilizing them in game, which boy, they're creepy. So she will actually put like a piece of butter inside her dragon staff, and that is her artificer tool. And then the dragon will vomit grease everywhere.
Yes.
So she does things like that. And there's no reason you can't like summon a demon toad, like say if you want to cast grease, and the toad just barfs like all over the floor. Like,
yes.
You know, I think that like it largely comes up to you, and then you kind of don't have to worry about whether it's a conjuration spell or evocation spell.
You could do all that. You could take it a step further and be like, everything you cast as a spell, like you have one creature you've summoned. You made a bond with one thing. And every magical effect you manifest is has its origin point in that thing, whether it's you want to theme your spell list somewhat, but I don't see anything wrong with that. And it's like cool, right? Like it's better than just like sort of treating the spells as superpowers or something like that. You know?
I mean, like chill touch, like that's a hand you have on you.
Yes, right.
Like just something really upsetting. Because there's nothing chill about it, and it's it's not.
There's not. But if it's like a desiccated hand that flies out from your pocket and touches someone, that's creepy.
Yeah, like it's just on your shoulder, lifeless, and then it could just like pops off and grabs somebody. Yeah, like a tarantula that is just waiting for its big moment. So that's kind of ideal. It's hard. I think, however, if you want to run a one-on-one shot, summoning spells are fantastic. They help you as the GM kind of like have a more epic adventure, and to like a much larger scale, but with one player. It can be really great.
That's a really good point. And in that sense, there's a lot of like crazy things you can get up with Animate Dead, and how many skeletons can you have out.
I'm very aware. I have done all the math.
It's upwards of what, 97 or something like that.
It's 97, 99 range, and of course you want to use Finger of Death and create
Undead.
Yeah, so you can like gain control over 2 mummies. I believe you can get like up to 12 whites. The whites can make zombies themselves. So there is kind of like the math has been done. We've all done the math, I think, at some point as necromancers.
It's all out there. It's
preposterous and a waste of time.
It literally requires you to spend all of your spell slots of 3rd level or higher on either Animate Dead or Create.
Don't sleep in. Don't ever sleep in, because you've got like an entire army running around.
Although my favorite use was just the same 4 zombies. You just patch them up, put them in plate armor. That's fine. Keep it manageable.
You just keep, especially for an artificer of some kind, like if you want to kind of flavor it that way, you just keep on putting braces on their bones, and then they're held together with like sap. It gets real gross, or super glue.
Yes.
So we have another question. What are cool ways you've used warlock familiars, infiltration, manipulation of items, etc.? I used to send one of my familiar imps. My imp looked like me and would like be a mini me and would talk to people, because that's one of the invocations, is that your familiar can talk on your behalf.
Okay. I love the idea of a tiny homunculus, right? Like, just like it's a mini. I love that. I absolutely love it. Here's my criteria. Is there a rogue in the party who's going to be upset that they aren't the sneakiest? If there is, then you have a couple of options. Either that rogue now has a buddy, and you just sort of flavor it as you can go ahead, do your character thing, but you know, you've got some help with you. Or you sort of like divvy up, all right, when is it appropriate for me to send my familiar in here? And there's a lot of like ways you can kind of handle it. I think a lot of DMs handle things like familiars and more permanent summoned creatures as like total control. Whatever I want this thing to do, it does. And I'm a much more of a, yeah, you have some influence over it. It sort of like has to obey you in certain conditions, but it's also not, it's also a living thing. It's got a will of its own. It's seeking to resist, even if it agreed to be here, there's still something about it that's not going to give you complete and total control. And so you're sending it off by itself. You're sending an imp off by itself. Like, why? Aren't you worried about what it's going to do? Like, it might do exactly what you said and then more. You know, you didn't say not to poison every, you know, cup in the banquet. That's the kind of that's the sort of thing that I'll let them know might happen beforehand.
I mean, that's the flavor and that's the fun. Like I ran, you know, someone was using a familiar. Again, Megan was doing it was a one-on-one shot, and she was using a gazer familiar, and it had a tendency to like get into trouble like a gremlin. So it would like try to eat the dog, the neighborhood dog, or it would be in the beer barrel, right? Or the whiskey barrel, getting drunk, chasing rats. You know, just gross stuff it could get up to all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
I like that kind of flavor.
Yeah. Just thinking about like, for one, yes, I love that too. And that's the sort of like role play, sort of adding things, because you never know when one of those moments is going to spin out into something bigger or something.
Yeah.
For the mundane familiars, the owls, the bats, the cats, things like that.
Yeah.
It's entirely, I base it entirely on how prevalent magic is in the world. So like I have a setting where the major city in it, basically it's water deep. Every building has entrances for familiars. Every window has sort of a perch for all the flying creatures. And it's just sort of a custom of the city that you don't mess with animals. Everybody's nice. You have no idea which one of these is just a stray cat, someone polymorphed, someone's familiar.
And so everybody's just golden compass thing, right? Like you don't,
exactly
don't screw with animals.
Don't mess with them. Don't mess with these animals. You know, everybody leaves out milk and treats and things like that because you never know. And that's one way of doing it. If they're that prevalent, then it would be incorporated into like the culture and society of the place. If it's not, then you know you might see something like, well, why is that animal behaving really oddly? Like, what's up with that animal? Why is this, you know, creature that's not normally found here, and why is it behaving so weird?
Yeah.
And I just think of like, how many times have you caught a bird in a house or something, or you know, it's gotten trapped somewhere. They freak out, but this one's not. Something's up with that.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good point.
That's how I handle those things.
Yeah, you just don't walk in their room with a raven looking at you. Like that's
well, this is why rat is my favorite familiar. Rats are everywhere. They scurry. You know, no one's going to be like, oh, it's a rat. What's that doing here? You know, it's a rat. Come on.
That's a good point. Yeah, Gazer's a little less stealthy.
Right.
I'm a little surprised Gazers are allowed to be a familiar, actually. I forget the rules around that because they can do so much. I'm not. I'm forgetting exactly where it is that you can grab them, but I think it's more just like, oh, they're tiny, but it's they also have a ranged attack. A couple,
right?
they got a few. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like if you're raising the dead, it's like your buddy Steve who died in battle, and you just keep on bringing them back, or it's like an old enemy. And having that role play experience can be hilarious, and that's a very John Constantine kind of thing to do.
Yeah. Especially if with undead, treating it that way, you can give the undead some personality, right? You can have like there's them there, you know, that in many ways I see that as part of why these spells tend towards evil. You know, in prior editions, like casting Anime Dead was an evil act,
right?
In part because it's like that's not just a body. It's not just meat. That's not a meat sack. It used to house a soul, and in D&D, a soul means something. There's like residue from it.
Sorry, Wild Megan.
Right. And so that's what I would treat it as, is like there's something left of that person there. It's why you can speak with dead and get some answers, from them. It's what I love about D&D is that it takes it takes something and treats it seriously. Like, yeah, your soul is eternal. It was, it was sort of, it's going to be recycled through the positive energy plane, and part of it gets shed in the upper realms or lower realms, wherever you end up, but it's going to be embodied again or something. Like, it's a real thing. And so, like, treating it that way in terms of the game effects, it opens up so much. You don't have to have just a bunch of nothing skeletons. You could get like some real knuckleheads, pun intended, who are just, causing trouble, making jokes, always like taking themselves apart and doing weird things with them. There's a lot of fun things that you could do with your undead buddies.
And that's the other thing. I think what I like about the new UA summoning spells is, like, and you just made me think of this. I just want to be the Goblin King. I can just summon Fae, and I tend to treat goblins as Fae, in my brain. Same. And so I would just be like, I summon a Fae creature, and it's just like a hilarious gremlin, who is just causing trouble.
It's going to spoil your milk. It's going to take your baby and leave a wooden replacement.
As they do.
As you do. I don't know if anybody out there remembers Ernest Scared Stupid, but it scared me first off, this is a long time ago, and it really got to me because I was like, what? They're going to turn these kids into wooden statues? And like, that kind of Fae creature is great. And yeah, I agree with you. Goblin King all the way. That's why I annotate my monster manual as well.
Yeah.
I have an annotated monster manual.
What's key to a good so we've talked about flavor, and there's lots of ways. I mean, obviously this is all built in. Edward's Black Tentacles is a good example. Arms of Hadar is a good example, like tentacles showing up. We've got a lot of tentacle themed things that happen. Earth and Grasp, I would say, is also up there. That feels very much like Conjuration. Some other kind of creature.
Control Flame is one of those where it's like, yeah, I have a tiny little flame elemental that can inhabit other like natural fires, and that's what allows me to make them brighter, dim them, make them explode in a shower of sparks, that kind of thing.
How would I do darkness? Like, what would I say? Like, just a shadow demon appears and then slowly just exudes.
Yeah.
A creepy ghostly corpse just like appears, and then just darkness flows out of its mouth.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Or a swarm of ravens that it just becomes too much darkness to even see. So
all of those are great.
Yeah. I mean, the Artificer, very much the terminology I would tell as the Artificer, encourages you to come up with different mechanical reasons why these spells are functioning. I would like to see in further editions and further like commentary on spells that same level of encouragement of weirdness. It makes the game more interesting. It's a lot more interesting than just saying I cast Fireball.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that there's a tendency especially in combat, to keep things moving. You see a lot of advice for both players and DMs to like, don't, this is your precious time is on the line and all this other stuff. But there's a way to like do more than just state things in the pure mechanical sense, and avoid the overly flowery, sort of descriptions that can make combat run longer. A lot of it can be done in between combat. Oh, hey guys, next time we fight or next time we're in a big battle, this is what my spells look like. After the session, when you're just, chatting or whatever, just hanging out, you can do a lot of that kind of coloring of your world and sort of reflavoring. It doesn't have to be in that moment. And then once you've established that base, when it happens, just like, oh yeah, my summoned dragon head, appears, fireball here. You can just like be short and sweet with it.
Which, if you look back at like an old movie like Excalibur, everything was an extension of the dragon.
Yes.
Right? The dragon that was underneath the earth. And so everything just kind of like lightning was its tail. The smoke was the dragon, the fog was the dragon's breath.
Yes.
So everything was kind of very evocative in that way. What are cool ways you've used Warlock Familiars, infiltration, manipulating items, etc.? I think we've already pretty much covered that. I think I already asked that. All those things.
All those things. Yeah.
Like I said, communicating is always funny. having a little quirky. The RP stuff is probably the funniest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys flavor summoning beasts? In other words, the druid, do normal animals come out of the environment when called, or is the caster summoning nature spirits that manifest in physical form to aid them? It's interesting. It used to be that these things were real, and they've gone very much the essence of things. Instead, I think that's to make you not feel bummed that you just got a whole bunch of deer killed.
Yeah. Look, just even looking at Conjuring Animals, it's very much like you summon a fey spirit. But I do like, at least for Conjure Animals, like as a DM, I'm going to give you something that's appropriate to the environment. And, I think we're going to hand wave the fact that they're just right there and they're going to come out.
Yeah.
But I do very much like it. It summons something. It calls something to you. It doesn't necessarily like conjure it out of thin air. It brings whatever's there to you to do, to fight for you. Now, some of the higher level ones, like say conjure woodland beings or conjure fae, that allow you to like summon dinosaurs and things like that. Yeah, that's a spirit from the Fey wild that's manifesting a certain form whenever it comes over to the prime.
Yeah, I always I would treat a lot of this, it depends, because I especially don't want anyone to feel like they just got a bunch of creatures killed necessarily. I would treat them like, oh, they just got, once they hit 0, they get sent back.
Yeah, certainly.
I do like the idea of a Tyrannosaurus Rex just showing up out of nowhere. Fun with a bag of tricks, certainly. You could have a bag of holding, that's your spell focus, right? You just got a bag and you pull out a monster. I mean, it's watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Right.
Why not go old school? I just pulled out a lesser demon,
Oh yeah. It's just I just happen to have them kept in there. One thing about like whether it's a spirit or not, or an actual animal, is like if it is a spirit, then it can be all kinds of things. It's like I summoned wolves that are twisted vines and bark and loamy earth that look like they just happen to look like wolves. I wanted to summon a topiary T-Rex.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've seen that in a film, actually. Topiaries all around, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you've been summoning this whole time. We got more incoming questions. This is actually a far more popular topic than I thought. Oh, we don't. I have questions about other things.
Oh no.
Yeah. Okay. So, that seems to be about all the questions we have for now. Well, I'm just curious, do you have a favorite school of magic so far? Or do you have what's your favorite conjuration spell out of everything?
Okay, out of everything, and Fog Cloud.
Wow.
Just go, it is useful at any level. It stops line of sight casting in its tracks.
Right.
Most people don't have the spells that counter it, gust of wind, things like that. I think.
It's a weird spell to have ready. Gust of wind.
Like the other ones, create, destroy water will get rid of a fog cloud. But like, who has create or destroy water just handy in their back pocket? Actually, my ranger does, but that's a different story. Fog cloud is one of those that you get it at first level, and I will keep it in my prepared spell slots for the rest of the time I adventure, because there's like never a time I won't find it useful. There's plenty of like higher level ones that are really fun, all the teleport stuff. Love Far Step and Thunder Step, things like that. But when I'm thinking like usability and how often I cast it and like what I get out of it, it's Fog Cloud, hands down.
Okay.
Boring answer, but it's mine.
I always go Everard's. I love tentacles. Like Everard's Black Tentacles. I've always been a big fan of. And then we've got some new warlocky spells. What's the other one? I always forget it. It's they're white tentacles. They're slimy and white and cold and acidic.
The Hunger of Hadar? Is that the
Hunger of Hadar is another good tentacle spell. I think that's very evocative and creepy because you're bringing something otherworldly into
you open the void of space to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and it's a really fun and flavorful spell. I would say the other ones I like, they're sort of like close runners up, or anything that summons a structure.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, whether it's tiny hut or one kind's magnificent mansion. There's a few from the Lost Laboratory of Qualish
Yeah.
that are there, like Galder's Tower.
Yes.
Someone's like a tower that's really cool.
It's also like if you summon a tower, okay, wait, everything else distribution. I mean, when you lots of questions. I have tons of questions.
So many questions. Yeah, I love a spell that just like, all right, guys, we got to spend like 15 minutes figuring this out.
I believe they summoned the tower on an airship once for the C team. Jeremy
Yes,
Crawford was DMing at that time, and things went real bad.
I bet.
So there's some pretty high fantasy stuff that can happen there.
Mhm.
Yeah. So another question. Oh yeah, no, we already got that. Sorry, I'm blowing up today. It's everyone's lining up my Slack.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think those are my favorite.
Uh-huh.
That I can think of so far. Other than that, yeah, I do like the Greater Demon is fun because of that fear factor, but that is
Yeah.
like a greater conversation with the rest of your party.
Yeah, you pull that out, somebody's gonna be like, "What? All right, what's going on here? Like, how did you?" Like, so one of my favorite uses for conjuration spells that I've seen is it's same campaign of Out of the Abyss, evil campaign. I'd given my players a scroll of gate because I like giving like 9th level spells out fairly early because most parties, they don't get to that level, they don't get to use these spells. So I
that's
like,
true, and they're
one time,
they're almost all plot points.
yeah. And so, they're in Neverlight Grove or something, and it's like Zogtamoy is doing their thing, and player was like, all right, I know I can't summon something that's on the same plane as me, but hear me out. And they wanted to basically gate in Dweeblix to do battle with the fungus demon lord. And that's it. I don't want to stick around. We don't want to have anything happen. We just want to like put them into contact with each other so they'll neutralize each other. And that was one of those where I was like, yeah, that's fine. We'll ignore the exact wording of the spell for something like that.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, where can we find you? I think we've kind of explored the space of conjuration magic and the possible issues.
Yeah.
I think doing it in a group 4 or bigger is a little dangerous ultimately.
Yeah.
Especially to move that combat along, and that includes familiars to a degree.
Yeah, certainly.
I think reliance on familiars too much can become deeply problematic.
Yeah. It's not what they're there for. I think they're there for something different. Like it's more of a flavor thing. You can maybe kind of scout, but it shouldn't like replace a party member. That's not really what I see them there for.
Yeah, I'm never even huge on them doing the help action. I feel like it's a little strong.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you get to do that once, and then they're gonna like swat away this one hit point animal.
Yeah. It's always a little strange.
Yeah.
Not to make fun of the size of
I'll say one thing, and this is sort of about the new UA spells. I love the material components on them. And
really?
They're number one, they're all greater than the threshold of just like having it in your material pouch or first focus. But it's like it allows you to present these spells as treasure. So that it's like, you've got the gilded skull or what I think the summon aberrant spirit is like a vial, like a crystal vial with a pickled tentacle in it or something.
Yeah.
And that's so evocative to me. It's so like, it's almost like, it's not quite a magic item in and of itself, but it's something that's more than just the usual material components. And like, you can put those in the campaign world and further solidify the idea of spells as treasure. Especially if you're DM like me and you go like, well, the spells that are in the free basic rules you can pick. Everything else is you either have to research it, find it, trade for it. I know it sort of goes against the way a lot of people play with their access to spells, but it's like there's something to be said for the better versions of things, like the unique spells, the ones that are different, as like rewards for those casters for going out there and adventuring and the like. So you can use the material components as a way to kind of simulate that. Where it's like, oh yeah, you found this thing, right? You didn't have to find the gilded skull of your dead best friend. You found somebody else's.
Always nice.
Always nice. Yes.
We had a question about how you handle NPCs or villains using conjuration spells. I do. it's real easy.
Yeah.
I plan my encountering accordingly. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's like a great answer, but like all you are as a dungeon master at the end of the day is a conjurer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's, I
exactly.
mean, I feel like that's a fairly easy answer. Where can we find Mr. Jim Davis?
Yes, I am on YouTube. You can check us out every other week now over on our YouTube channel, WebDM, and I'm sometimes on WebDM Plays, which is our second YouTube channel where we archive our Twitch games and those that we sort of sponsor and have on our channel. But I don't know that I'm there recently. I'm also on Eric Vulgaris's Pendragon game on Monday nights, and it is not quite D&D, but it is it's like D&D adjacent, and it is a superb game. Have a lot of fun. We go deep into like the emotionally intense role playing because we're playing like knights, and it's all melodramatic, and we have our duties and obligations, and they're cross purposes to each other, so that's fun too.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions in chat and listening to us talk about Conjuration all day. Stay tuned. Well, stay tuned. But from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., we are playing Silver and Steel with a fantastic cast, including Megan Kenreck, myself. We've got Freely being played by B. Dave Walters, and of course, the glue and one of the most wonderful people on the planet, Lauren Urban, is playing Callie, the very stabby Warforged. And it's an excellent show. And of course, that bronze girl is the one DMing, so check that out. The NPCs are absolutely amazing. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.